There have been plenty of people trying to cheer us up in these extraordinary and challenging times, whether it's PE classes with Joe Wicks or amusing clips on social media or the latest TikTok dance to master or the list of the all-time top 50 comedy sketches to watch during lockdown. The Queen, she was so wise in her recent television broadcast to the nation when she said that isolation this time, it is hard in many ways, but it also presents itself as an opportunity to slow down, to pause and reflect in prayer or meditation. And at this Easter time in 2020, in the midst of the coronavirus crisis, here's my, if you like, 6-minute reflection for you to fill 6 minutes of your isolation. I'm afraid it's not sort of the number one comedy sketch. That's the two Ronnies doing their sketch about 4 candles. Well, this isn't about 4 candles, but actually it's a reflection about not 4 candles, but 4 coronas. You see, back at the start of the year, most of us thought that Corona was just a beer. Corona beer, all about Mexico. There's a recent advert for Corona in Australia, and it simply says, Corona, the Mexican beer that Australians drink. And yet, as refreshing as Corona is, I'm pretty sure all of us, we now recognise that the situation that we face at the moment is far more important than just cracking open a Mexican beer and pretending this pandemic is no big deal. Now, wind the clock on from the start of the year, and for all of us, obviously, we have journeyed beyond Corona being just a beer. Corona is now a virus, named Corona because the virus looks like a crown, and Corona is Latin for crown. And this virus, it's been all about mayhem. The Queen summarised it so succinctly when she said that the mayhem of the coronavirus has brought grief to some, financial difficulty to many, and enormous changes to the daily lives of us all. And yet in the midst of this mayhem, it's right not just to sort of look down through the microscope at this virus all the time. Now, I'm not minimising how important and a massive an issue this is in our world. We're so grateful to so many who are on the front line tackling this virus. We're praying for those who are struggling and suffering. We at Holy Trinity Clapham are looking to put the love of Jesus into action through our HTC On Call ministry. We've started a pop-up food bank. We're supporting other food banks. We're looking after the vulnerable and the elderly. We're working with the Ace of Clubs who are helping those who are homeless at this time. But rather than sort of merely focusing down on the coronavirus all the time, now, particularly at Easter, now is a time, as it were, to lift our eyes up, above the mayhem and lift our eyes up to the third corona. The corona thorns, the crown of thorns that was placed on Jesus' head as he was crucified. This is what it says in the Bible. It says the soldiers stripped Jesus and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. They put a staff in his right hand, then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said. They spat on him and took the staff and struck him on the head again and again. After they'd mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. Our third corona, the crown of thorns, is all about mockery. The soldiers mocking Jesus. How could this man claim to be a king when he's so pathetic and feeble and about to die, they're saying. And today, yes, there are some who actively mock Jesus, like those first soldiers. But more of us, I think, we mock Jesus not in active ridicule, but we mock Jesus just by ignoring him. Just by turning our backs on him, by getting on in our lives without him, not treating Jesus as our king, by our actions saying, Jesus, I think I know better how to run my own life. And that makes a mockery of King Jesus, the king who claimed to be God walking on this planet Earth, the king who loves us so much that he goes to his death on a cross for us, who longs to be king of our lives. And we say, no, Jesus, no, thank you. We know better. We want to be king of our own lives. Get out of my life, God. And particularly at Easter, we remember that this king, he didn't just die, but 3 days later he rose from the dead, conquering death. The thing that you and I, we most fear, death, the thing we try and avoid, but which has been brought front and centre of our consciousness in this season. And the Christian claim is that King Jesus has conquered death and he is now crowned with glory. And that's our fourth corona, our final corona. It's one I'd love you to journey to this Easter, the corona glory, the crown of glory that is all about Jesus's majesty. You know, if you were to visit the Queen in Buckingham Palace, on display is a book written by an earlier British monarch, King Charles I. And it was written shortly before his execution in 1649, and the book's called Icon Basilica. And in the front of the book, there's this really striking image. There's an image of King Charles I, and he is seen kneeling. And in the picture, you can see 3 crowns, 3 coronas. There's his royal crown lying at his feet. There's a crown of thorns that he's holding, knowing he's about to be executed. And then he's looking up, his eyes lifted up towards the heavenly crown of glory. And the message is clear. King Charles is ready to take off his earthly crown, of him being in charge, of him being king. He's prepared to take the earthly crown off and to take hold of the crown of thorns, the crown of suffering, and be executed. And he's prepared to do that because he is lifting his eyes up to the heavenly crown of glory, to Jesus. Now, I'm no historian. I don't know whether this was just the royal supporters of the day or not, but I do know this. You and I, we wear a crown too. We all do. You can't see it. It's a crown symbolising who we worship as king of our lives. It's a corona. And the question is, where are we going to place this crown? Because it's got to be placed somewhere. Who are you going to crown king of your life? Yourself, or money, or sport, or sex, or education, or your spouse? Who or what do you worship as king in your life? Now, for me, and for countless other Christians around the globe this Easter, the one we worship is King Jesus. That's where we've placed our crown. And why? Well, if this coronavirus crisis, if it's taught us anything, it's taught us that we are not in control. And all the other things that we're tempted to worship in life as king of our lives, they've crumbled too. Money, it's crumbled. The stock market's plummeting. Sport, it's crumbled. There's nothing to watch on TV, just a virtual Grand National. Education, it's crumbled. Exams scrapped. Even sex has been crumbling into decline with a 2-metre distancing rule. Pretty much every single possible king that we let take the place of God, that we worship, that we dream of, that we focus on, that we work for, they have all crumbled. But King Jesus remains. And I wonder what you make of him. The one king that loves you no matter what you've done. The one king that has lived a life you or I could not live and has died a death for us in our place so that we can know peace with God, a right relationship with our Maker. The one king who has conquered death so that in him you need not fear what the future brings. You need not fear death. I wonder what you make of this king. Where are you placing your corona? For me, I'm placing the crown on Jesus, the king who has died for me in love and risen from the dead. And at the very least this Easter, can I encourage you, would you lift your eyes up and would you investigate who this King Jesus is? Those soldiers who were gathered round the cross on the first Good Friday, they cried out, "Hail King Jesus," in mockery. But you know, by the end of the day, one of those soldiers, he was crying out, "Hail King Jesus," in gratitude. Today, would you also place your crown on King Jesus? Thank you for listening.
Seeking heart through the voices of distraction, you are calling me to truth, drawing me to you.